Book Club, which is for readers who are passionate about women-centric historical fiction, transformative storytelling, and powerful female voices. In this episode, I get to talk with author Marcia Cebulska. Marcia is a recipient of the Dorothy Silver Award, the Jane Chambers International Award, and other honors for her playwriting and screenwriting. Her dramatic work has been performed at thousands of venues worldwide and aired on PBS, one of my favorite channels, by the way. Marcia's guided journal, Skywriting, which is amazing, was published in 2019. Her first full-length work of fiction was launched in September of 2020 and is entitled Watching Men Dance. Welcome, Marcia. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So I want to get started first by we get to talk about Watching Men Dance today, which I'm super excited to talk about with you. So I want to kick us off by just starting with a summary of the book. And I'm going to actually read the back cover of the book because I think it's beautifully said. Probably more articulate than what I could say on my own, unless I read one of my review, which I did write a review on this book, and it's on Goodreads. And because I just loved it. Definitely 5 stars.
Thank you.
So here's the summary. She is a wanderer. He will not fly. She is a city girl. He prefers a bison ranch. She grew up in her father's Greek restaurant. He dances at powwows. Ava and Jesse travel life together in a turquoise pickup truck, feasting along the way. They settle, raise children, cheat, gamble, and fight with great gusto. When Ava leaves to travel around Greece like a female Odysseus, their bonds are tested. Marcia, tell us what inspired you to write this beautiful story.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think the biggest lightning bolt of inspiration came when I was working on a play that used the Odyssey as a reference point. It was an adaptation of the Odyssey. So that meant I read a lot of Homer and commentary and went through the epic several times, wrote the play, saw it produced, and then I just started thinking something kept bugging me. And that was, okay, how come guys have to have all the fun, right? I mean, we have our culture hero, Odysseus, and yes, he runs into challenges, but also he gets to travel, wander, feast, he vanquishes monsters. Meanwhile, the female main character, Penelope, is at home, faithful and weaving and sitting in one place. And the idea crossed my mind, what would we think of it if the genders were flipped? If the woman was the adventurous one and traveled and feasted and vanquished. So that idea sat with me for a long time. It percolated and it marinated. And then 2 other things came up that were also somewhat lightning bolts of a different sort, like emotional lightning bolts. And that is, I ran into doing some spring cleaning. I ran into a box of items that I had long forgotten about. I assumed this box had been lost in a move. And in the box, there was a tape, 2 tapes. One, an old cassette tape, very fragile, of Greek love songs, erotikos, is the title. And the music in it, there are these duets and they're plaintive and they're full of longing. And I just felt so moved by them. And the second tape had Native American drumming on it that I myself had recorded at a powwow in Portland, Oregon, way back in like 1970 when I was very young. And I played that and it also moved me. And I didn't know how all of this was going to fit together in this tale of an adventurous woman, but I had such strong intellectual reaction to the idea of the woman adventure, and then such an emotional reaction to this music that I knew that somehow this was all going to come together. Um, and I, right now, just to give everyone a taste of the writing and a sense of the character, I'd like to read the prologue and a
Yeah,
little bit of setup here. Um,
that would be great.
oh, good. Okay, so the prologue is set in Chile, in South America. And since this is a story that has a lot of travel in it, I think there's 3 continents, maybe half a dozen
Mhm.
countries, and like a dozen states in the US that it travels through. That made it a story I was not going to tell on the stage because it would be almost impossible. But I love the idea of writing it as a novel and did. And here is the result. Here's watching.
I just love that cover. It's so cool.
I do too. I do too. It really speaks to a lot of things in the story. Um, the the prologue was written actually. It was the last thing I wrote. The
Oh,
story in the prologue is referred to several times in the book. And a friend of mine, a writer, fellow novelist, read a manuscript for me, gave me comments, and he said, "You know, you refer to this story. Why don't you tell it earlier on?" So I said, "I'll just tell it smack at the beginning."
hmm.
Um, so I'm gonna read that, and then we can talk further.
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay. Chile, New Year's Eve Day, 1969. She thinks she may have taken the wrong path. The grass has given way to hand-packed dirt. The barren boulders surrounding her are increasing in size. Her rented stable horse is slowing down, trying to find its footing. What happened to the village that was supposed to be here? Where are the happy natives dressed in yellow festooning the streets? And the children carrying empty suitcases, ready to start the adventure of the new year? Where are the copper vats of chicha, the intoxicating grape beer she's heard so much about? The animal masks, the drumming, the jumping 12 times at midnight. It was all in the guidebook. Ava tries to comfort herself with how snugly she sits cradled in the Chilean saddle. It's really just a pile of hand-woven blankets cinched with a wide belt, but it makes her feel safe. And her horse, she reminds herself, is a corralero, a sturdy Chilean breed built strong and low to the ground. Worst comes to worst, she could give him free rein. Horses always know their way home, don't they? Her right knee scrapes against the rock face of the narrowing canyon. No turning back now. Just when she thinks she is hopelessly lost in a stony maze, Ava sees a widening space between the rocks ahead. An opening, a beach, the Pacific Ocean lapping gently on the shore. As far as the eye can see, there is sand and turquoise water. The view is awesome. Here she is in a picture postcard world, riding a horse on the wet sand of a stunning beach. She wishes she had a camera. She really must buy a camera. Taking her feet out of the stirrups, she sinks into a comfortable slump, whispering thanks to the gods for leading her to this quiet place. Not bad for a girl who grew up above a Greek restaurant in Chicago. Chicago, where right about now her father is reaching into ovens for the holiday legs of lamb, fragrant with garlic and rosemary, where right about now he is lifting a wine glass to toast before the busy night. And right about now, he balances the wine glass on his head, practicing for tonight's entertainment. Ava pictures her mother laughing and applauding her Greek husband, his showmanship. Ava's parents didn't like the idea of her leaving home for the holidays, but they would be happy to see her on this beautiful beach, rocking lazily in the saddle, the sun warming her skin, the lazy gait of the horse rocking her gently, the peace of it all. The rhythm of the waves is drowsily soothing, so she is surprised when she sees the gelding's ears twitch. And then a sound, a distant pounding. The sky is clear, yet there is this deep loudening, like muffled thunder. She slips her feet back into the stirrups, looks over her shoulder, and sees horse heads bobbing among the boulders, riderless horses, wild horses, making their way onto the sand behind her. Her horse picks up speed. The herd thunders forward, gains ground behind her, approaching fast. Blankets are all that are holding her in place, a pile of blankets, holy crap. Finding themselves on open ground, the wild horses work up to a canter, then a gallop, their manes like flags in the wind. They pound the ground alongside her. A guttural sound emanates from her depths, the voice of fear, a scream of terror drowned out by hoofbeats. As the wild horses pass her, kicked up sand bites her lips, her nose, her forehead. Instinct takes over and she lifts herself off the saddle. Leaning her head down close to the gelding's neck, she stands up in her stirrups like a jockey. Her long dark hair streams behind her like a flag in the wind. She is in the middle of the pack now. Ava gives up and gives in. She joins the herd. The herd has its own heartbeat and she becomes a part of it. The larger rhythm of the swarm, the flock, the hive, the tribe, the living, moving earth, the chorus, the crowd, the flood, the unanimity, the allness and togetherness of beings. Standing high now in her stirrups, she seems to split open inside, losing any trace of fear. She is light and powerful. She is flying. The wild horses pass her, then turn into the rocky hills, leaving Ava and the stable horse behind. She returns to sitting in the saddle. Her sweaty hair is plastered to her face. Her face is covered in grit. Her nose is skinned. Her hands are cut raw from clinging to the reins. Her eyes blink wildly. The lathered corralero slows to a trot, a walk. The sea laps gently at the gelding's hooves. The sky is clear. She is safe. She is throbbing. She wants it to happen again.
I just love that prologue. It just embodies so much of what this book is about with the sensations. And I mean, you just visualize it and you get an idea of who she is and, you know, her character and where she comes from. It's a beautiful prologue.
Well,
so I'm so glad you wrote it.
I didn't leave that off. That was, as I said, it was the last thing. It was the last thing I wrote. So it was
the writing process is so interesting from that perspective. So let's talk about Ava a little bit. She's just a character who fascinates me. What were some of the characteristics of Ava that you felt were particularly important as far as what you wanted to draw out in the novel that really reflects that spirit of the adventurous woman, which I think that prologue really embodies?
Yeah, I think the most important characteristic for me was that she had a great love of life, a great gusto for embracing life, and characteristics. Okay, well, I think curiosity is a big one. Curiosity about people and places that are not part of her background. Risk taking. We have put in the prologue that I just read that she was traveling in South America on her own, alone on horseback. I mean, that's a lot of risk taking. And so that adventurous spirit, part of that is being willing to take some risks. I think a sense of wonder is part of it. And when she's also, when we're at the end of the prologue, I think one marker of really being adventurous is that after this episode, which was dangerous, right? And at the end of it, she doesn't pack up her clothes and go back to Chicago to her family. That line, she wants it to happen again, says a lot, that she's ready for another adventure. Yeah. enjoying travel. There's a lot of travel, as I said in the book. Liking to celebrate. I think those are some of the things
Yeah.
that I think um, are part of Ava. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like how where she's riding in the herd and it's
Mhm.
like she just allows life to happen. And I think we can all learn so much from that, just even if we aren't adventurous spirits ourselves,
Mhm.
to be able to learn something from the adventurous spirit. And that's why, for many of us, to live vicariously through characters like Ava is so much fun, you know?
Right, right. To embrace, yes, there's embracing the present, but also, as you say, when we're reading,
Mm-hmm.
to put ourselves in the position of the character. And, in this last year during the pandemic, it's the only way we could travel, right? So I mean, we
Right.
travel through the characters that we are reading about, and I think I think that's great. It keeps us alive and keeps us going and keeps us just interested in life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank God for books.
Thank God for a book. Right, right, right. I've done a lot of reading the last year.
So, so much of this book is about travel and understanding different cultures. And I'm curious about what the research process was like
Mhm.
for you while writing this book. Was there anything that you found particularly surprising to learn in your research?
Hmm. Okay. First of all, the whole research process, terribly difficult, awfully taxing, really troublesome to travel to Greek
Yeah.
islands and drop down in London for a while, hang out
Yeah.
in Tuscany. Somebody's got to do it. I mean,
Right.
sure,
Thank
somebody.
you.
Usually, when I'm doing research, I've done a lot of writing of plays or films that are set in another time, and my usual process would be to read what I can about the time and place, interview over phone any people that I can contact, tell me more about it. Um, and then, if possible, go to the place and surround myself with that history or that time. And in this case, there was less of knowing ahead of time because partly I was drawing on some personal history, although the course of the book is very different. There's a lot of things I've never done, um, and part of it is the character's discovery of different places herself. So I wanted to return to a lot of places that I had been before and explore some others. Um, and in terms of surprises, actually, one thing that surprises me over and over again whenever I travel is how humans are so drawn to creating art, literature, music, and how humans love to also enjoy those things, the literature and art and music. Um, when I was in Greece and went to the archaeological museums, I would go to like the earliest evidence of humans on that land. And yes, there were like shovels or axes, but there were always also earrings and necklaces, and people want to create and have an aesthetic sense from way back thousands and thousands of years. Golden masks. I mean, so many things that are just so gorgeous. And clearly, people, and sometimes we're taught that people were only about survival, but I totally disagree. I think
Mhm.
art and creating art and enjoying art is like a marker of being human. And I'm going to tell you about one thing in particular when I think about people creating art. When I was traveling with my husband along Ava's route on her home journey home, she stops in Spello, and I made that happen because my husband and I were traveling by train along her route, and we just decided oh, it's time to find a place for the night. And we stopped in Spello, a place we'd never heard of, a place we'd never been. It's in Umbria, it's a hill town. very medieval, beautiful walkways and flowers, bougainvillea on the
Wow.
walls, and just gorgeous place. And we found that people were there. There was a festival going on, and people were on the ground with big buckets and baskets of flower petals and herb leaves, some fresh flowers and some dried, and they were making these gorgeous pictures on the ground, like paintings made out of flower petals and herb leaves. And each different little neighborhood was making their own, and they were just gorgeous creations, extremely colorful. Um, and if anyone wants to see them, by the way, on YouTube, if you look up my name, there's a YouTube video called Three Peeks into My Research, I think it's called. And there you can, it's the first visit on that video. And you can see the gorgeous flowery creations. Well, they stay up all night and using tweezers to move little teeny
Wow.
flower petals, getting it so exact, caring so much about the beauty that they're creating. The next morning, after they're all done, the bishop comes to the town and he says a mass in the church, and then he comes out. He walks out in a procession, and walks right through these flowery creations. They're messed up. They're disturbed. The flower petals fly into the air, and it's a totally temporary work of art. But they still devote themselves so much to it. And I think it says something about our time on Earth, that it may be brief, but we can create things, and we can enjoy beautiful things while we're here. Yes.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I did get a chance to see a picture of that you had posted, and of course you had you write about that in the book. You
Yes,
put that part in the book too, and it's just it's just I had never heard of something like that, so it's pretty stunning. So, well, why don't you read us another excerpt of your book, Marcia? I want to maybe you want to give us a little bit of a summary of what you're going to read next, or a little.
Well, what I'm going to read next is early in the book, but I'm thinking of that, what we just talked about, coming upon something surprising, some coming upon some people being creative in some way, and also anticipating what we're going to find in a place. Those two things I think are in this section. Plus, it introduces our second main character. So this is in Seattle in the summer of 1971. She finds herself in an abandoned part of town. Trying to cheer herself on, Ava makes up a wish list for her summer in Seattle. Eat some salmon, smoke a cigar, see a totem pole, climb a mountain, sail on the sea, look for mermaids, take tons of pictures. She has a camera by now. On this, her very first night, she's recording the journey of a piece of cellophane being carried by the breeze. Remembering the French movie The Red Balloon, Ava is photographing what turns out to be a potato chip bag as it tumbles along the sidewalk and sails through the air. And although recession hit Seattle is not Paris, and what she's following is just a crumpled bag, she trails it as if it were fate itself. It leads her through a forgotten park, past a cigar store Indian poised outside a Chinese restaurant, past a boarded up shop called the Grand Map Emporium. The bag somersaults and sails until it plasters itself against the window of a mirror store where Ava's image confronts her by the dozen. Seeing her travel-weary eyes and her hair frizzled like a clown wig, she spits on her hands and uselessly pats down the top of her head. Unceremoniously, the bag falls to the ground. Ava looks up at the sky. Hey, you up there, really? Can't you send me something with a little life? A gust of wind picks up the red and white bag again, and Ava sprints, trying to capture the fluttering cellophane in motion as it flies around the corner. And that's when she sees him, the boy in feathers. He stands in profile, poised in concentration, waiting, just beyond a mural of a mermaid painted on a brick wall. Bared arms and legs adorned in feathers and bells, he holds himself perfectly still. She thinks, oh my God, he's so. When the sound begins, the loud, wonderful beating. Her attention moves sharply to the right, where 3, 4, 5 men, all wearing jeans, t-shirts, and red bandanas, strike a large drum in the middle of the street where a crowd is starting to gather. How lucky she is. She barely got off the plane and finds this happening. The drummers start singing. To Ava's unfamiliar ears, they seem to wail, to cry out in a language she doesn't recognize, but thinks she can understand, can't possibly understand, though she desperately wants to. Voices call and respond, drum beats resound. The sound is strong. It makes her forget hunger, fatigue, homesickness. She is in Seattle, listening to a band of native drummers, men beating out a rhythm, voicing a lament. Ava becomes absorbed into the sound. She feels herself reverberating as if she herself is a drum. Now the ankle and wrist bells of the boy in feathers add to the rhythm. He begins to dance. She wants to see this. She is eager to see this. She must see this. Ava edges forward between t-shirts and handbags to get a better view. She watches the dancer strike the pavement with bare feet. Bells jangle. The fan of feathers on his back vibrates. Shiny black hair moves in waves across shoulders that are strong, graceful, and stately. Body lithe and young. He can't be much older than she is. He is beautiful. Ava Odessa Papousakis is 20, and she believes she is hearing an ancient song about the pettiness of humans and the wrath of gods. She is young, so she thinks she can right grave wrongs if she just really listens. She photographs the 5 singers sitting in a circle, striking the large drum and the single dancer. She snaps pictures quickly, hungrily. She wants to capture the fleeting movement, record the vision as if it were about to evaporate. The rhythm shifts to single unison beats. The tempo increases, volume rises, feathers whirl, sweat gleams, the dancer stomps. She leans forward, watching with her whole body. Now she can see him up close. 2 stripes of color paint each cheek. His eyes are a captivating sea green. Really? She lowers her camera. He dances in place. If she didn't know better, she'd say he was dancing just for her. Her cheeks flush. As the song ends, Ava tries to assemble herself into some kind of dignity, walks towards the drummers, and drops change into the donation box for the Indian Cultural Center. She watches the next dance and the next. The crowd thins, the air cools, the singers pack up and leave. She sees this from the corner of her eye, knows this is happening, but she is watching the beautiful being who is still dancing. She is the only audience left. He starts to sing now. He is his own accompaniment. Aya Waya Haya is what she thinks she hears. She wonders what it means. She doesn't care what it means. She very much wants to know what it means. The evening darkens. The street empties. They stay. She watching. He dancing ever more slowly. She bites her lip. His foot bleeds. She drops her backpack. He stops singing. She steps closer. He leans forward. She closes her eyes, feels warmth. Was that a kiss or a feather? He speaks. You ought to come with us to Portland for the big powwow next weekend. It'll be good. She steps on the potato chip bag that has been floating around the square, arrests it in its journey. She thinks, just got here, Portland far away, can't possibly. But then again, a chance to hear the beat of the drum, the jangle of the bells, to feel that tremble in the bones. She says, sure.
Oh, I love it. It's such a beautiful segue to that first moment when you like that infatuation moment when you fall, like the beginning of love. And then
Yeah.
of course all of the sounds and sensations. I don't know, Marcia, I think you need to have an audio. Do you have an audio version of this book? You read it really beautifully.
I don't yet, but several people have requested that. Yeah, several people have
Yeah.
requested that.
I
Yeah.
think you
we'll have
should.
we'll have to work on that.
Yeah. That's next, right?
Right.
So let's talk about Jesse's character. I kind of fell a little bit in love with him myself. He was just a fascinating character. He even has more than one name in this book, and that really sparked my curiosity. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? What drove some of those creative decisions?
Right. And I'm glad you like his character. It required a lot more thinking, working, observation to create him because I'm female, he's male, and he's a culture, and I had to really delve into experience and go to the Makah reservation and stay there and just embrace that character myself. Yes, he is called many things, both to his face and behind his back during the course of the book. When they do travel to Portland for the powwow, his invitation you just heard there, they travel with some teenage native kids who call him Chief. And then later, when they're at the powwow, the young native women are talking about him to Ava, and they refer to him as Chief Stud Muffin. I love that word.
Which is fair. He does seem like a stud muffin.
which indicates his attractiveness, but also something a little gentle and appealing about him at the same time. In contrast, when they get arrested, the police, who very well know his name because they've written on his Joseph on his driver's license, so his official name, but they derisively refer to him as Tonto or Cochise. They address him that way. Hey, Cochise, get over here, that kind of thing, which is insulting and degrading. Ava herself, as we just heard when I read, she doesn't know his name, doesn't know anything about him. So in her mind, she's thinking she's referring to him as the boy in feathers. And later on, even she corrects herself and thinks, oh, that's not politically correct. We ask men to call us women, not girls, so I should really call him the man in feathers. So she refers to him that way. And there's a distinction in the early part of the book between what strangers call him and what friends call him and what the narrator calls him. His very close family and friends, his grandmother, his close cousin, his old buddies call him Jesse. But his formal name, his given name is Joseph. And so in the early part of the book, when we don't know him well, when we're not close, we're not intimate with him, the narrator calls him Joseph. The Ava mostly avoids addressing him, but she calls him Joseph. And then when we leap ahead 7 years, and they're settled in Kansas on a bison ranch, then he's Jesse all the time. And part of that is that he's named after his father, who's also named Joseph, who lives with them. And part of it is just an increased intimacy and closeness. And so then he's
that makes sense.
Pretty much Jesse all the time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too that he is not only Native American, but part British and I believe Ukrainian. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. His mom is Native American, and his father is part British and part Ukrainian. And in fact, his full name, Jesse Weaver Lightfoot, people could think that the Lightfoot is like an Indian last name, but
Right.
actually it's his on his father's side, it is a British last name. So yeah, and yeah, both of them have a lot of mixed heritage. So her father is of Greek background, and her mother was of Polish, Polish American.
Mhm.
So yes.
Yeah, I love that. Especially for, I come from a family of Ukrainian, Russian, German, and Irish. So to be able to read a story about people who are only second generation or first or second generation Americans, I
Mm-hmm.
really felt like I could resonate. I really resonated with this story
Oh.
from a personal level. Um, so I'm curious, because it is so multicultural and global in many ways, what do you hope readers take away from this story when it comes to our country's multicultural heritage?
Mm-hmm. Um, yes, and I'm going to go back to what you were just talking about, your identification with it. Um, when I wrote the first drafts, I asked friends and other writers to read the drafts and give me feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And something that a couple of people said were, well, maybe you should make it more simple. Make Jessie Polish and make her Greek, and it wouldn't be so many all these different cultures. And I was not so sure about that. So I talked to my adult daughter who'd also read the manuscript, and I told her what a couple of people had said, and she said, "No, Mom, no, this is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
This is who we are." And so it kind of echoes what you just said. We have all these different strands, and I know when I was growing up, people used to say, "Oh, it's a melting pot." I never knew quite what that meant. I mean, the first time I had fondue, I thought, "Oh, is this a melting pot?" And everything gets mixed into this gooey, cheesy kind of.
Yeah.
And then later on, people said, no, 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 not a melting pot, a stew. Like, okay, like, chunks of thing floating in a broth. It didn't, those metaphors didn't work for me. And I think I tend to think of um, a braid, like strands of a braid.
Mhm.
We have all these different strands, but woven together, they become something on its own, this
I
braid.
like that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
my own personal metaphor for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I think that's a much better way to describe it because
Mm,
and plus I think it helps us kind of recall honor our roots, the people who came before us and really many of them were fearless and adventurous too to be able to come into a country that they didn't even know the language, or the customs.
right, right, right. And sometimes, some of those um, aspects, some of those cultural markers, the food is sometimes maintained, or some customs are, and sometimes not. But it's part of who we are. As my daughter said, this is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some people have described this book as a journey of self-discovery for Ava, and I'm going to do one last reading here, uh,
Wonderful.
which has to do with the search for who she is. In this part that I'm going to read, she and her brother Ava and her brother Mickey are traveling around Greece. Their father is from a Greek background. Um, and part of what their mission is that their father wanted to be his ashes to be tossed onto the Aegean Sea. And part of it is, since they're doing that, anyway, they're going to Crete, where their family comes from. They uh, want to know a little bit, where they're there, find the home village if that's possible, find any cousins if that's possible. So
Mm-hmm.
they do find a cousin who runs an inn. They find somebody with the same last name, Papatsakis, and he is a distant cousin, it turns out. And one day on a holiday, a Holy Spirit day, excuse me, um, he takes them on a little excursion. Excuse me, I need a little drink.
Sure,
Notice
go
when
ahead.
I'm drinking that my
Yeah,
publisher made the Watching Men Dance mug for me.
I love it.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so this is about visiting their ancestral village, Petrohori on Crete. Dmitri drives his old red truck up the mountains with speed, shifting forcefully, willing the groaning truck up and up, climbing into herb-scented air. The roadsides become more colorful with wildflowers, the houses spread out, and then suddenly the road narrows into a village. The stone walls surrounding the town are whitewashed, the streets cobbled. As Dmitri leads them to the church, his face assumes a dignified composure. His shirt is starched and pressed, and Ava is glad she's wearing her one and only skirt. Mickey turns and says, "Church?" He screws up his face, and Ava knows he is remembering the 3-hour incense-laden Orthodox church services of their childhood. But Dmitri has timed their arrival perfectly for lazy Westerners. They reach the church door just as it opens at the end of the service. Attendees spill out with smiles on their faces and green branches in their hands. A lovely Greek woman hands Ava her branch. Dmitri says, "It is a custom. This is called philoxenia, love of the stranger, hospitality." Everyone is welcoming them with branches. The Greek priest, with his long beard and dark robes, hands each of them a piece of bread. Dmitri nods his head, indicating to go ahead and eat, eat. The home-baked bread tastes of honey. A large group gathers around them, jostling each other, remarking on how tall they are. They walk together, this group, down the stone cobbles where the purple bougainvillea drops blossoms like giant drops of blood on the street. Dmitri tucks a sprig of rosemary behind his ear. The children run, tagging and teasing each other, watching the American faces, looking for resemblances. They could all be named Paputsakis. They enter what looks like a neighborhood store. Outside, a couple of commercial freezers advertise ice cream confections with bright blue illustrations. Inside, advertising posters adorn the walls, mixed indiscriminately with Cretan folk art. A bullet hanging here, a chocolate covered caramel bar there. The heady scent in the air, however, has nothing to do with ice cream, but instead conveys the deep, pungent smell of lamb. Women wearing flower printed aprons bustle around, carrying baskets lined with paper napkins and filled with bread. Tables line the length of the room, covered with paper tablecloths clipped on top of oilcloth. Carafes of wine join the bread on the tables. Mickey and Ava seat themselves across from Dmitri. He now seems an old friend among all these strangers who might be long lost cousins or newcomers who moved here last week. Mickey is intrigued, anxious, and too big for his chair. Dmitri finds this amusing and brings him a larger one. Mickey laughs his great hearty laugh. "Try this, the local wine," Dmitri says. "I think it is good." And he is right. Ava is struck by everyone's willingness to be happy, their eagerness to create a party, to put their concerns aside and sing together. She knows they must have woes, illnesses, bad business deals, breaches of trust, adulteries, and yet they come together. A young man of maybe 15 or 16 holds a lira, that's a stringed instrument, on his knee, the neck touching his narrow collarbone. His voice is haunting. Stronger, bigger men surround him, requesting this or that song with their booming baritones. One song tells about a hero who led an adventurous and bawdy life. Ava catches an occasional word or phrase, those eyes of hers. And then she saw him. "I want it all." Glasses are raised, bottles emptied, meat gnawed off bones. Arms are slung around shoulders. Ava searches for her father's face among these singing men, and then she sees it behind another huge Cretan mustache, and a man with rosy cheeks and a hearty laugh. This man has Papa's spirit as well as his face. Grief rises in her again, but she tries to shut it down by imagining this villager balancing a glass on his head. Yet no one does that here. For hours the villagers sing, telling tales in song. After they've consumed acres of food, Mickey asks how he can pay back the generosity. Dmitri says, tipota, nothing, nothing. They ask again and again. Finally, Dmitri says, shrugs his shoulders, maybe a little ice cream? Mickey goes out to the bright blue freezers covered with depictions of cartoon characters eating giant ice cream cones, peers inside. An aproned woman joins him, solicitous, wondering if she can help. He wants to buy the entire contents of the freezers. He knows how to say all in Greek, and like the heroes in the songs he's just heard, he says, Tathelo ola, I want it all. The men are delighted and find another song with that refrain. The Leda is struck with the bow, producing the sound of a past they never knew, but now can't help but remember.
I love it. I love it.
You're so appreciative. It's wonderful.
It makes me want to just go back. Like, I haven't been to Greece, but that is definitely going to be on my adding. Well, I think I've always wanted to go to that part of the world, but this just, the sensations and the descriptions, it just makes me want to go. And it reminds me too of being in Europe and feeling that welcome, you know, like the festivals and you know, pull up a chair, have a drink, you know,
Right.
enjoy life. And I just,
Right. Yeah, there's and customs. I mean, hospitality has such a long tradition in Greece. I mean, it's since I was drawing for some reference points to the Odyssey when Odysseus travels.
yeah,
Before they ask his name, they feed him, and same thing with Nico's cousin Zakis when he talks about traveling around Crete. Same thing, you know, people offer him a bed and feed him before they ask his name.
yeah,
Um, and even in Greek restaurants, I mean, you sit down and they bring out, uh, before they take your order, before you look at the menu, they bring you something to drink, something to eat, some olives and tomatoes and cucumbers and a little ouzo maybe.
yeah,
Um, and they say, this is from the house, you know. This is
yeah.
that gift to the stranger, that hospitality. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, thank you, Marcia. Let's, I know we're kind of running out of time, so I want to go ahead and I'm going to ask you some speed round questions. I think these will be fun. So I've got 3 questions to ask you before we wrap up. And then, of course, I'll let everybody know where to find your book and that sort of thing. So the first question is, as an adventurous woman yourself, you are quite a traveler, it sounds like, what is one of your favorite places you've ever visited?
Hmm. Okay, well, I'm going to stick with Greece here.
Yeah.
There's an island called Sifnos, which is a little hard to get to, and Americans don't often go there. But I just adore it. I've been there 5 or 6 times, and I love it because it has beautiful local pottery and silversmithing and beaches where you can sit with your feet in the sand and eat wonderful fish, and there's great paths through the mountains. The architecture is stunning. Anyway, and Ava does visit Sifnos briefly, but it definitely is a place that I love and want to go back.
Okay. What do you always keep near you while you're writing?
Well, in my case, I think it's maybe not so much what, because I don't, you know, there's no lucky charms or talismans, and I write under all kinds of situations, sometimes on a notebook, sometimes on a computer. But there is a who that I keep with me at all times, and that is my maternal grandmother, who was a fantastic storyteller. She would tell a Polish version of Cinderella in which she would kick off her shoe, a very dramatic storyteller. And she's my muse. And so she's always with me.
Oh, I love that. Yes. What is one of your favorite books by an inspiring female author?
I'd have to say Lily King's Euphoria. And the reason I say that is that I read Euphoria from beginning to end. And when I turned the last page, I went right to the first page and started reading it again. I read it twice in a row immediately.
Oh,
and
wow.
then afterward read most of her other work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a sign of a good book when you've read it twice. I think I can count on one hand the number of books I've read twice.
Yeah. Right.
Well, thank you, Marcia. And I'm going to just to let everybody know, Watching Men Dance is available here locally. I forgot to mention that Marcia is actually, you're located in Topeka, Kansas, aren't you?
That's correct.
So she's near where we are, which I'm in the Kansas City area, for those of you who aren't in this area. But her book is available locally at Rainy Day Books, and they also have signed copies. So head over there, independent bookstore. It can also be ordered from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any independent bookstore in the country. So look at bookshop.org would be a great place to look if you're wanting to order from an independent bookstore and don't want to give any more money to Jeff Bezos.
Right.
You know. And then, of course, it's also available at Walmart, Target, really anywhere books are sold. It sounds like you can get a copy of Watching Men Dance.
And that doesn't mean that they necessarily have it in stock. I mean, they may have to order it for you.
Yeah.
It's probably not on the shelf in your local Target, but they will get it for you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So look for it and request it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Happy to do that. Right.
And then you are also on Facebook and Goodreads. And your website is cebulskawrites.com. And if you sign up, you can get the occasional newsletter and request a signed book plate. So that's an option. And I will I'll make sure people can see where to find all of that. I'll write it all out.
Spell it out. Not everybody can spell my last name, right?
Yeah. Is it Polish?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then readers can contact you at your email account, which is marciacebulska@gmail.com. And I'll also include that information for people. I think did I miss anywhere else that they can find you? Instagram or?
I tend to narrow myself to Facebook. I have an Instagram account and all that, but I tend to pay most attention to Facebook. So.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I had so much fun, and I learned even more about you. So that was lots of fun.
I enjoyed it thoroughly, and thank you so much for inviting me. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.